All right, here we go. Pieces of our journey to 16 years after your wreck, huh? Pieces of our journey. Number 104, part 4, right? So we're going to talk about the hospital stay today. That was a 4-month ordeal, almost 4 months, not quite 4 months. His wreck was on November 8th, 2008, and we were in the SICU for around 3 weeks, right around the 1st of December, and then we went upstairs to the 8th floor, the trauma center floor, and we were there till February 23rd, which is when we went to a nursing home. But we were he was in SICU for right about 3 weeks. It was a little over 3 weeks, actually, because it was day 21 that he opened this eye, just a crack. And it was a major victory for me. That's when I started realizing that progress is progress. We're not digressing if we're progressing, right? So progress was progress. That's been our motto all along. Progress is progress, right? Progress is always good. Now, progress is going forward. It's not going backwards, so we'll take it, right? Spent 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks. I want to say 24 days is what's in my brain in the ICU there. And I didn't even leave the floor for over 10 days. And finally, I went down to get something to eat or something somewhere around Thanksgiving, before Thanksgiving sometime. But I didn't even leave the floor. And the first week that we were there, oh man, he had so many visitors from Northwestern, his band friends, his musicians and all. There was so many of them that came those first few weeks. As a matter of fact, there was a couple, Kimberly and the Sheltons was their last name, I think. Kimberly and Grant and Kimberly, I think was their names. And they came the whole first week. They fed us. They took care of all of us, and there were several of us there. His friend Corey she was in the Air Force, so she went and got cots for us so that we could sleep there in the waiting rooms on cots, literally. And they brought food, and there was, for that weekend, there was mom, and I don't know, there was a whole bunch of us there in ICU waiting. And so we were there just waiting for him to kind of wake up, to move, to do something, and he just didn't. He just didn't, right? He also, though, on top of all of his injuries, he got MRSA. He had MRSA, and that was more respiratory. So they actually put him in an isolation room in ICU. And that was kind of nice and kind of not. We were kind of away then, but we still had to stick to all the visiting hours and things like that. It was really hard to not just go sit with him, right? We couldn't do that. And so we were there, and it was in the waiting room where I was constantly in prayer. You begin to question my faith. Did I not have faith? Did this happen because I didn't have faith? I thought my faith was supposed to protect me. That's not what faith is about. Faith is what carries us through. And so I began redefining my faith during that time. And I read Psalm 121 that says, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. And he had good care. Chris had good care. Good nurses, good doctors. Everybody was taking good care of him from what I could tell in the ICU. But I knew they were not my help. God was going to be my help. And I actually wrote a little song. His friend Jarrett brought a guitar. So I had a guitar there while we were there in the hospital. And the whole stay, and the nursing home too, for that matter. But I began to realize that my help was from God, that the nurses weren't where I put my hope. My hope was in God, and the hope for the whole journey. Of course, it was all new there. The terms were new. I didn't even know what was going on half the time. You're in this trauma, this funk shock thing, right? And you're stressed out. Cough it out, bud. Stressed out and just wondering how things are going to be. You get very little sleep. Plus, it's the trauma center. So in the middle of my own trauma, I'm hearing other people come in the middle of the night with brain injuries, I remember hearing doctors tell someone their son would never walk again because he broke his back, and it was a spinal cord injury. You need to cough that out. This is an ongoing issue, so it's no big deal to me. I hope it doesn't bother you, his breathing like that, because he had the collapsed lungs and the trouble with the lungs after the wreck, but he already had asthma from when he was younger, so this is ongoing. This is nothing new for us, right? I got my bags packed in case I need to take him in, but he's actually doing okay. His numbers are good. He just needs to cough that out a little bit. But anyway, so that was a crazy 3 weeks. Thanksgiving was really nice. People brought food. People would bring baskets. This is something I think I still want to do. I haven't figured out how to do it yet, but I'd like to start making baskets to take to like ICU waiting rooms, maybe the trauma centers, maybe OU Baptist, something that, or, OU Med or Baptist Hospital or something, and just water bottles and little toothbrushes and toothpaste, gum, Tic Tacs, little things that you don't think about, little packages of tissues, things like that. And maybe coffee pots, because the coffee pot was an issue. I won't go there. But, we were there for 3 weeks. Then after 3 weeks, and they had already started, the social worker, poor lady, had already started talking about putting him in a nursing home. And I remember Ranella and I going to look at a few, and a couple of them we were just like, no. But the problem really was no one would take him. They would say they couldn't meet his needs. They couldn't do therapy with him because he didn't have insurance. The kid that was driving didn't have insurance. So we were just kind of stuck there. We knew he was going to be on Medicaid. And that's a whole nother story too. But anyway, there was a little nursing home. Anyway, so we went upstairs. Then after about little over 3 weeks in ICU, we went up to the 8th floor, and we were in an isolation room still because of the respiratory MRSA that he had. Man, he had so many antibiotics. I remember IVs all the time, CAT scans all the time. Always looking at those lungs, seeing if those ribs were healing. It was crazy. And he had a trach by this time. About the 3rd day in ICU, they put in the feeding tube, and they put in a trach, and then they put in some little filters of some sort in his legs so that if he threw a clot, because he was going to be laying in bed for a while, that it would catch that clot and not go to his lungs or his heart, right? So he had the feeding tube put in and the trach. That was a really hard day too. That was, man, it was just so long-term, right? It was long-term. I knew things were getting longer already, but I knew he needed sustenance, and I knew he needed to be able to breathe, right? So the trach was better because it didn't have all the hoses and stuff all in his face and stuff. And so we go upstairs to 8th floor isolation. And that was actually kind of nice because we didn't have anybody around. But the problem with that was there was no one around. So we didn't have the other people we had the ICU waiting room we were there so long. There was a pecking order, like I got the recliner when the people before me left, and I don't remember who claimed the recliner after I left, but that was my chair, and everybody knew it. And then after I left, somebody else would get that chair, and it was their chair, and everybody knew it, and they would even move. You come in the room, oh, here's your chair. And it was just kind of this community there, and we would encourage one another, we'd pray with one another, we'd cry with one another. And I was like, man, this is like church, except it hurts, but we were all in stress. We were all in those situations. Lots of stories came out of that, but I'll spare you. And but then when I go to 8th floor and there's nobody there, we're in an isolation room, limited. Everybody had to gear up, so full PPEs. Didn't even know that's what they were called back then, right? And but we had to go. Everybody had to gear up because he had MRSA and all of that. And until he got all that cleared up, and he had the trach, so we had to suction him every time he coughed, and it was long nights. I couldn't have a sitter because I was there, but because I was there, I couldn't sleep. So Ranella and his dad, they rotated, and Candace was in and out some too, and so they would rotate who stayed with me. They would stay with me, and that way I could sleep a little bit, and they could be right there in case he coughed and needed to be suctioned, and then they could sleep and I could watch him. And we rotated. I read books. I bought a new Bible when we were in that room because I was like, my Bible doesn't make sense right now. And that's a hard spot to be in, especially somebody who was raised in a Christian home, raised in ministry, 13th generation minister, and the Bible's been I've known you can stand on it, you can hold on to it. And now all of a sudden my world has been jerked out from under me, and I don't know what faith means anymore. I don't know what anything means right this minute. I remember going back and saying, you know what? All I know is I'm saved. I'm sure in that. I know that, but I don't think I know anything else. And so I began to let God redefine my faith during that time. I read some different books from different authors that I hadn't read before. And I read a lot of books. We did a lot of puzzles too, lots of puzzles, word puzzles, number puzzles, all kinds of puzzles. And also had a DVD player, watched a lot of movies and things like that. So we spent our time well, but I spent that time, I started in Genesis, and I just started reading again. And I'm going, because I got to see this differently, because what I've been taught isn't fitting where I am. I was taught you confess it away. Faith kept bad things from happening. And all of a sudden, faith, either I don't have any faith, or Chris doesn't have any faith, or we failed in that. And I knew God didn't fail. So I began to let the scriptures redefine my faith. And I found out that faith didn't keep Daniel out of the lion's den. It held him while he was there. Faith didn't keep the 3 Hebrew children from going through the fire. It was there with them as they went through the fiery furnace, right? Faith didn't keep faith didn't keep Jesus off the cross. It didn't keep the persecution from happening to the church. It didn't keep the disciples from being persecuted. It didn't keep Paul out of the prison. But what it did do is sustain them through all of those things. And I was like, I've seen faith differently. Faith is what carries me. And I coined my own little term, keep the faith, it'll keep you. You just keep the faith. And that's the struggle in those times when you've literally lost everything. See, I'd gotten rid of everything when I moved to Chicago. And so I didn't really have anything physically. I'd left a dresser and my trunk at my mom and dad's house. And I did have a vehicle. And I had my guitar and it was a portable keyboard. Now I have a piano. And that was like all I had in the world. So I didn't have anything to lose beyond that. But I didn't have a home to go to. And I was like, man, this is everything was jerked out from under me. I was fixing to finally go to Africa like I'd always dreamed. And I'll talk more about how that turned out later, but it was like everything was gone. And I was like, faith was supposed to keep this from happening. As a matter of fact, I trusted God to take care of my kids because I was going to go to the mission field. And God was supposed to take care of my kids, and he didn't. I've got a problem with that. And you know what? It didn't make God mad for me to tell him that. For me to go, I'm mad at you, God. I'm just mad at you. This isn't the picture I saw. I trusted you with my kids, and now Chris is hurt, and now I don't know if I can trust you anymore. And he didn't go, well, I'm not playing anymore then. Right? He got it. And I began to see that. I started reading the Psalms differently. I saw Psalms like Psalm 13 where David says, how long, oh Lord, will you look the other way? Like, yeah, what he said. How long will I have this anguish in my soul and no comfort? Are you not hearing me today? And I'm like, yeah, what he said. And I realized that if David could say it and it was in the Bible, I could pray it. And I'm like, wow, God, it was enlightening to me to realize that it didn't surprise God if I said, I'm mad at you. I'm just mad. I don't trust you right now. And God's not like, well, I'm not going to play anymore then. I'm just going to take my stuff and go home. No. Instead, I found out that he met me in that spot of deep grief, of deep loss, of deep sorrow. He met me there. He didn't shun me there. He didn't throw me away. He didn't say, I don't have to listen to that. Don't talk to me like that. No, he met me in my pain and in my sorrow and in my grief. He met me there with all the grace, all the mercy, all the love, and all the peace I could handle. And I began to let my faith be redefined as we hung out there in the hospital there for that 4 months. And by the time we left there, it was still traumatic. Everything was traumatic. Everything was messed up. I didn't have a job. Where am I going to work? How am I going to make a living? I don't have anywhere. I can't just go home. I don't have anywhere to go. I wouldn't leave Chris. What do? I didn't leave the hospital. I finally, once we got out of the isolation room and in a regular room, which has some stories of its own, I would leave and go do laundry and come back, or maybe go buy groceries and come back. But I wouldn't stay gone long. He almost always napped the afternoon, and I would run while he was napping, or while they were bathing him or doing some procedure or something. I would run real quick and go do things. But I didn't. But it took me over 2 months before I ever even left the hospital. I believe it was about, I think he was still in ICU, and I finally one day went, I need to go outside for a minute. And I went outside and I was like, whoa. It was like overwhelming because I didn't realize I had just been stuck in an ICU waiting room. And it was the most traumatic thing in my life. It had to be the darkest moment. You're looking for faith. You're looking for what you thought was real. You're looking for everything you've always held on to, and nothing is there, and you don't know what to do. But one thing I did decide in that hospital, and once I realized that it was really going to be a long road, one of his friends came, and I guess his mom had worked insurance. I don't remember who it was or what, but I remember he said, so this is going to be a long thing because he was still not really waking up much. And I started realizing that, and I'd started running. So I went out for a run. It was more of a walk, but it was kind of a run, sort of. And I came back in, and I crawled up in the bed with Chris, or got up close to him, and I went, Bubba, I can't walk this for you, but I can walk this with you. And I realized God does the same thing to us. He says, I can't walk through time for you, but I can walk through time with you. And so I've seen so much of who God really is and how he's really there when we don't have any strength left, when we don't know where to turn, when we don't know what to do, when we're overcome with grief. He doesn't throw us away and tell us, get yourself together and come back. He is right there. Daniel told the king, he said, the angel of the Lord came and shut the mouths of the lions, but he still spent the night in the den with the lions. And when you're in that den of lions, God can come and shut the mouth of the lion. They won't devour you, but it's still a long, dark night. But what happens? We just keep trusting God. I had to redefine how I prayed, how I read scriptures, how I understood scriptures. And it was a very difficult time, a very emotional time, a very dark time, a very hurtful time. You fill in the blank with whatever. I don't even have the right words, right? But it redefined how I was going to trust God. And it solidified the fact that I'm going to trust him no matter what the day looks like. We're going to trust God, right? Are you trying to talk? You trying to say amen? I heard you making some noise. You're going to say amen? Say yeah. Say yes. Amen. Yes. We're going to trust God, right? Yes. There you go. Good. Yeah. We're going to trust God. That's right. Whatever comes, he's not going to leave us. We may ignore him for a little while. I did. We may not acknowledge that he's really there. We may wish he was louder. We may wish we felt him closer. I did do this sometimes. I would go down to the chapel and have communion. And there was a piano down there, and I would go down there and play the piano sometimes and play. But it was hard to play worship because I was mad at God. It was hard to find that place. But I began to play and write songs that were like, I'm going to trust you. This is hard. This is difficult. This is dark. But I know you're still God. I know you're still there. And I'm going to continue to trust you on this journey. And that was our hospital stay. Our next video will be covering when we go to the nursing home at Turo and how we got back to Oklahoma. So stay tuned and keep trusting God. I'll see you next time.